Yeah, I love listening to Spanish music. So I feel like I have that on constantly in the car and at home, and I'm always trying to figure out the lyrics and listen. And I'll go to my computer or my phone and translate them sometimes so I can learn some new words. I wanted to be able to communicate with people and to build relationships, and I've found that by even attempting to speak with them, they get so excited. People are extremely friendly and thrilled that I want to learn the language. I have a favorite fish market down here where I like to go in and talk about the fish and see what they have. And so I went in and I know the guy there and I had a whole conversation with him and we were laughing. Yes, it's definitely hard and frustrating, but it's so fulfilling and you do make progress. It's just given me a chance to learn how I learn best instead of going into a classroom and kind of sitting there occasionally. That can be a little bit boring, at least for me. I think there's just ebbs and flows to learning languages, and I certainly have had times, I still do, where I just get frustrated and overwhelmed and I'm like, how am I going to learn all of this?
Hola a todos. Welcome back to Conquering Spanish, the podcast where we celebrate the power of language learning. I'm your host, Tanya Roman, the Student Success Manager at Spanish 55. And as a former language teacher, I've enjoyed getting to know countless students on their language journeys. Having learned Spanish, French, and English, I understand firsthand the challenges and rewards of language acquisition. This podcast explores the inspiring stories of our Spanish 55 students. Our guests share their personal experiences, offering valuable tips and takeaways from their journey with Spanish. Each story will inspire and guide you as you continue your path to conquering Spanish. In this episode, we're thrilled to have Carolyn Huber join us. Carolyn is an entrepreneur with her own business in the agriculture field, proving that language skills can open doors in unexpected ways. She's also a language enthusiast, having previously learned French as well. Carolyn divides her time living in Washington and La Ventana, Mexico, with her husband and her dog. She uses Spanish to speak with her community in Mexico and in her job, demonstrating her adaptability and the language's usefulness, and how it can enhance both personal and professional growth. So, join us as we chat with Carolyn about her journey with Spanish, her experiences living in Mexico, and how the language has enriched her life. So welcome, Carolyn. We're excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So, Carolyn, we know that you are a language enthusiast. You divide your time between Washington and Mexico. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and maybe something that not quite a lot of people know about you?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I do. I spend part of my time in the Columbia River Gorge. It's a gorgeous part of the Pacific Northwest. And my main interests up there personally are kiteboarding and mountain biking. And so I do a lot of that up there with my husband. And then we come down to Mexico in the wintertime, do the same thing.
Wonderful. And how is it different from doing that in Mexico and doing it, in the U.S. mountain biking?
It's just the terrain. Up in the Northwest, it's really foresty and mountains and rivers. Down in Mexico, especially where we are down in La Ventana, it's really the desert. So I'm kind of like moving my bike around, avoiding cactus and prickly things.
Okay, yeah, so it's much more of an adventure down here.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful. And you I know that you studied French before and you started studying Spanish in high school. How was that your first contact with the language?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, for Spanish, yes. I've had the opportunity to travel quite a bit. My dad was a professor at the University of Oregon, and so he went on sabbatical and taught in multiple places throughout my life. So I've certainly had some experience with Latin languages, especially Spanish.
Could you tell us maybe some of the places that you went to where you heard Spanish?
Yeah, well, Spain. Certainly. We did actually spend some time traveling around Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that was it. He's Brazilian.
Okay.
And so we spent some time in Brazil, but that was Portuguese. So
Right.
overall, I've had a lot of experience in general with Latin American
Oh,
languages.
okay. And how would you say your experience learning Spanish has been different from learning French? Um, has it been very different? Has French helped you in any way to get, concepts?
I would say quite a bit. Certainly a lot of the vocabulary is fairly similar. It took me a minute to not kind of pronounce things in the French way, but my coach Atenea has kind of helped me. She sometimes is like, that sounded a little bit more French. But yeah, I think it's certainly been useful to have the background in French.
Okay. All right. And so right now, you are working with Coach Atenea. You've been working with her for more than a year. How has your experience with her? And you actually, you've done more than 50 lessons, which is amazing. How has that been different from other ways that you've learned Spanish before?
I think probably the biggest thing is I get excited every time before a lesson. I look forward to seeing her. She's just a really great person.
Mm-hmm.
And she's given me the flexibility, I think, in terms of my learning. She just leaves it up to me to kind of guide the lesson. A lot of times we have things that we want to chat about. And so I get a chance to practice speaking Spanish. If we run out of things to say, she's got a million things for us to do. We use the workbook, we can read. And so I feel like it's just given me a chance to learn how I learn best instead of going into a classroom and kind of sitting there occasionally. That can be a little bit boring, at least for me.
Right.
And I think she's made it enjoyable to really come to class and uh, build it around what I need.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most important aspects in learning when you find it enjoyable, when it's actually vocabulary or situations that you're actually going to use in your real life, right? There's nothing better than actually knowing that you're going to use certain phrase instead of a phrase that, it's just going to be in your brain and never going to see the light of day.
That's a perfect way to say it. And that's what I appreciate the most is because I'm telling her, I'm like, "Oh, I didn't sleep very well last night," or things that are really going on with me that I might say to somebody else later in the day. And so I've already had that practice. I've learned some words. And she also just teaches me some of the more kind of local languages so I can say, "Oh, that's cool," or something. It's not
Mhm.
just totally out of a textbook. It's more conversational.
Exactly, and that's what we need because it's so
Mhm.
different, textbook Spanish from real life Spanish. And how has your experience in La Ventana been now that you are improving your Spanish skills, probably talking to your community much more? Has it been much more enriching?
Definitely. That's really the main reason why I started taking the lessons so seriously and taking them every week. I wanted to be able to communicate with people and to build relationships. And I've found that by even attempting to speak with them, they get so excited. People are extremely friendly and thrilled that I
Mhm.
want to learn the language. So even if I don't know all the words, they'll help me along the way and we laugh and we engage. And it's helped me to connect with the community and create some new friendships.
That's wonderful. And did you start let me just get the timeline here. Did you take up speaking Spanish with Coach Atenea before you moved, or had you already moved to La Ventana when you started your lessons?
Yeah, we had already moved, and I had tried a couple different ways of learning. I had been to a couple classes with groups here, and I had done
Mhm.
some online apps, Duolingo and Rosetta Stone, listened to podcasts, all of which were really helpful. But I didn't feel like I was truly progressing and able to have real conversations.
Mhm.
And so I was looking for something that was going to get me there. And I was thrilled to find Spanish with U5 and Atenea specifically because she's truly helped me immensely to be able to communicate with people.
That's wonderful. So definitely more opportunities and more doors have been unlocked for you now that you're combining your daily life immersion with your classes, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
have you faced any challenges along the way? I think it's really
mm,
important to also talk about those.
definitely. I think there's just ebbs and flows to learning languages, and I certainly have had times, I still do, where I just get frustrated and overwhelmed, and I'm like, "How am I gonna learn all of this?" And then I'll come back the next time, and I'll have a great session, or I'll go out and I'll have a whole conversation with somebody and be so thrilled that I just did that. And so I think kind of my advice would be just to stick with it. And yes, it's definitely hard and frustrating, but it's so fulfilling. And you do make progress, even though it doesn't always feel like it every single session, every single conversation.
Right, it's a little bit like riding a roller coaster, right? You have your ups you have your ups and downs, but you have to ride it out. And did you ever feel maybe like you wanted to get off that roller coaster and say, "Ah, I don't think this is for me."
Totally. Yeah. Regularly. I mean, that definitely happens. But I think I had the goal of really wanting to be able to communicate, and so
Mhm.
I just pushed through it. And like I said, it definitely has not always been easy. It still isn't. I'm sure it still won't be. But it's so fulfilling and worthwhile that
Mhm.
it makes me want to do it.
Do you have maybe a favorite moment, whether it be in your lessons or whether it be in real life where you said, you know, you mentioned conversation, but maybe a conversation that sticks out, that you say, "This is why I'm doing it."
We just arrived in La Ventana about 3 weeks ago, and so I had been living in the U.S. prior to that and taking my lessons, but not speaking day to day in conversations with people in Spanish.
Mhm.
And I have a favorite fish market down here where I like to go in and talk about the fish and see what they have.
Wow.
And so I went in and I know the guy there, and I had a whole conversation with him, and we were laughing, and I really like was able to say things to him, full complete conversations. And
Mhm.
recently I would say that's kind of just been my biggest win, is just feeling like this little thrill that I'm truly communicating in another language. And
That's wonderful. Like when you feel the laughter, because laughter is essential in our communication. Sometimes we overlook it, but when you laugh with somebody, it's because we understand one another, our values, culture, etc. So I'm really, really happy that you had that exchange. So, has there been anything that has surprised you the most about learning Spanish? Whether new opportunities, unexpected friendships, or any changes in how you think or feel?
I would say learning more about the Mexican culture by being able to communicate them has been the most exciting and surprising. They are so friendly and helpful, and I think oftentimes for me, and I know some of my friends get a little nervous about actually speaking out loud, going out and speaking in another language. And I so recommend it, because what I found, at least in my experience down here, is they are thrilled and they love it when you try to speak with them, and they're more than happy to help. I've had half an hour long conversations in ice cream stores with people, just trying to kind of formulate my words and figure out what to say. And I would say that that's been really an enriching experience to be able to communicate.
And has that excitement been the element that has helped you overcome your nervousness when speaking with
Definitely.
somebody? Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, at this point, I think I almost look forward to it, and I want to be able to learn a little bit more about them, because I'm almost sure that for the most part, people are gonna be really excited that I'm trying.
Mhm, mhm. So just putting yourself out there is definitely, the way to not only make connections, but to keep improving. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you is that, you are already living in Mexico, you are already immersed in the language, you have your lessons. Are there any other tools, or, do you watch videos, read anything at all to also improve your Spanish?
Mhm. Yeah, I love listening to Spanish music. So I feel like I have that on constantly in the car and at home, and I'm always trying to figure out the lyrics and listen. And I'll go to my computer or my phone and translate them sometimes so I
Mm-hmm.
can learn some new words. Another thing I do is I spend like a couple of minutes every day on Duolingo. And I find that that really helps just kind of continue to think about my vocabulary, hear the words a lot. I wasn't doing that for about half the time in my lessons. And I noticed that when I also supplemented with just even a couple of minutes every day, I really felt like I improved faster.
Do you have any favorite Spanish artists?
Well, I really like listening to Bad Bunny, Manu Chao,
Ooh,
Yo
good one.
Soy That, French
Mm-hmm.
Braids. And then I just look for a lot of playlists that are like Hispanic artists or Mexican, anything, and then I make playlists from there.
Yeah, Manu Chao is very old school. I remember listening to them, and they have very good pronunciation. And since they repeat many phrases, it's really good for learning. So
Definitely.
it's a good way. It's a good artist that you found. All right. So my last question. It's not really a question, but I would like to ask you if you have a shout out that you would like to give to Coach Atenea.
Oh my gosh. I mean, wow. I'm beyond grateful for her. She's just an exceptional coach, a really interesting, intelligent person. And I literally I could not have improved this much without her. So I'm so grateful and thankful to her.
Wonderful. I'm sure she's going to have a great time listening to what you just said. Is there anything else that you would like to share? Anything else that you feel that you wanted to say, but I didn't ask?
I really appreciate all of you at Spanish 55. Every person I've interacted with, even on the administrative side, has been really helpful and kind. And it's just been a fantastic experience. I've turned a couple of my friends onto Spanish 55 as well. And now we all can talk about it and work together. And so it's just been a great experience. Thanks so much.
No, thank you. And it's wonderful that you're creating this community with those
Mhm.
around you. So, thank you so much for the interview, Carolyn. It was a joy talking to you. And I'm sure that you're going to have more lovely experiences in La Ventana with, with all of your kite surfing and your mountain biking, which we want to hear more about.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Conquering Spanish. Today's story with Carolyn Huber was a fantastic reminder of how language can transform our experiences and help us connect with the world around us. Her story also reminded us of the joy that comes from learning a language, especially when it's paired with true curiosity and an open heart. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to Conquering Spanish so you don't miss out on our upcoming stories just like this one. We've got more inspiring interviews, practical tips, and fun language learning content coming your way. You can also check out Spanish 55's website to book your complimentary introductory call. Link is down below, and make sure to follow us on our social media to stay connected. Thank you once again for listening, and keep coming back so we can continue conquering Spanish together.